Emma, thanks for making the time to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
So we were just talking about kind of where to begin and where to start. And although your kind of spiritual journey probably started a little bit later down the line, it'd be good because it's the first time we're kind of recording something and having a conversation like this. It'd be good to kind of start with where you grew up and kind of what that was like growing up. And then I'm kind of curious if your like kind of the friends or the parents that you had kind of influenced any type of spirituality or your mindset to what it is now.
Yeah, great question. And I think it's not really something that I've really dove into on podcasts before. Like, obviously, my backstory of like 18 plus is what most people know and what I sort of like talk about. But I grew up in Dorset, which is on the south coast of England, very next to the coast. So, very much I was surrounded by nature and the beach as a child, which I've always loved. But yeah, as a whole, as a child, I think I was always curious, as most children are, about like angels and spiritual stuff. But I don't think I remember my auntie being Buddhist, and like that was kind of how I learned about spiritualism. But yeah, I didn't really know much at that age, obviously, but I used to like buy crystals, and like my parents would tell me off because they would think the crystals were like bringing bad luck into the house or something. That was a whole drama I remember after a trip to Cornwall. So there's definitely like snippets of it, but I think I just saw them as fun rather than knowing what I was kind of buying or doing at that time with spirituality. So the school I went to was like it was like a Church of England school. So it was very much like Christian focus, like you would say grace and prayers and assembly and stuff. And it was just like the thing, like there just really wasn't not like a choice, but it was just kind of like that's what we do. And you'd learn about God and Ari, you'd learn about Christianity, and then you'd eventually learn about other religions as you got older. But yeah, I think I didn't really know much else because obviously, like, I'm 29 now, so back in the mid 1990s when I was at school, there wasn't diversity. There wasn't like, especially where I live, like there wasn't like a whole awareness of different cultures and religions around me. So I think it was quite sheltered, I think, my upbringing as such. So yeah, I definitely had a happy upbringing, and like I loved the school I was in and stuff. And then when I went to high school, I think that's where the inner work started to come up and surface as such as I would get older. And I think from there I felt this almost like really unsatisfied in this. I didn't really know who I was, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And as we all feel as we go through like GCSEs, A levels, college and stuff, you're kind of like, what the heck do I want to do? So I knew I wanted to start a business. I knew that that was the thing. But at the time, like what we do, none of this existed. So obviously back in like 2009, 2010, when I was in sixth form, I remember in business studies, we had to create a presentation of what our business would be. And mine was like a personal brand, basically. And my teacher was like, Emma, you've like failed the assignment. Like, you can't be the product. And obviously, I wasn't like me. There was other aspects to it, but it essentially was a personal brand. And I always remember and think, oh my God, that must have been like a little vision board for me, like all those years ago, because now that is exactly what I do. But it was interesting that even at that young age, with when YouTube was like a baby and like none of these things existed, that I was thinking outside of the box and thinking like, right, I don't just have to invent a product. I don't just have to create and invent something. Like I can have a different way of working. So I think that intuition was always there of like, you're going to do something. And I always, it's so weird. Like I remember when I was really, really young, I would go into like WH Smith with my mum every Monday. And I would be like, Mum, my book's going to be up there one day. And she was like, whatever, Emma. Like, yeah. Of course, Emma, of course. And it's like weird because all these little things, now I look back, I'm like, you knew, like, even as a child, like, you just had this knowing. And I've got this friend in my life who used to be my drama teacher years and years ago. And she said, Emma, like, I know she's super spiritual as well, super into the law of attraction. So it's funny how we're all years later into this together. And she was saying, you've always just had this like determination about you. And she was like, even as a child, you just had this determination. But I think a lot of my childhood and teenage years didn't make sense to me. And as I talk about obviously my actual spiritual awakening journey and the kind of trauma and things that happened a bit older, none of it made sense for years to me. So if I was explaining this story to you like 3 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, like I had a great upbringing, like my parents were fine, like they're still married, like, it was fine. I was just really miserable as a child. But why was I miserable as a child? Like that, it was like this missing puzzle piece as such, that going along this book that I've recently written, Hurt, Heal, Heal Journey, has allowed me to uncover and allowed me to understand myself, my inner child, and why I have gone through the experiences I've gone through in my life, and why, I've done things throughout my life as well. So it's really interesting talking about my childhood and like my upbringing and stuff from this new awareness, because it's like, whoa, like you had no idea of like any of what was really underneath that.
It all kind of makes sense in hindsight when you take the time to reflect. You kind of connect the dots and you're like, oh, like that makes sense why I acted that way, or why I was drawn to that thing, or why I said that thing. And one of the funny stories that came up for me as I was reflecting a few years ago was I used to always be told off in school, especially in primary, not as much secondary, but in primary and reception. Yeah, and reception. Um, and it was just for distracting kids, and talking while the teacher was talking, or while she set us an exercise or whatever it is. And so one day she said, I think this was year 2 or year 3, the teacher called in my mum on one of the parents' evenings and said, I think he should get his hearing checked. And mum was like, why? She's like, there's a lack of attention, and like I don't think he understands the assignments and the exercises that I give, and he was always distracting kids. So I'm not sure what's quite going on. Maybe it's something to look into. So my mum was like, okay, cool. So she took me to um the local GP, and then I was referred to like a specialist child, um say specialist child doctor, but there is a word for that. I don't know what that is. Pediatric, I don't know. Anyway, whoever it is, they checked my hearing and they were like, it's fine, like there's no issues whatsoever. And it's just because, and then I reflect and I realized actually what I was told off for and told was bad was communication and speaking to people,
Mm.
socializing and building relationships, essentially from the age of like 3, 4, 5, 6. And so as I grew up, I kind of thought, oh, that's a bad thing. And so I became really shy subconsciously in secondary school. Now I look back, I'm like, I get paid to talk. That's in everything I do. Either I'm writing or I'm speaking or I'm coaching or like whatever. And even in the corporate jobs I had, I got paid to talk as a recruiter. So I'm like, it's funny how the things that we once told were bad or shunned, they're the very things where your gift potentially is, right? To be
Yeah.
explored.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. Like if you spoke to my parents or like my grandparents, be like, oh, she was such a shy child. She never spoke. And and my parents actually like pushed me to do like performing arts and do like stagecoach and stuff, because they were like, we need to build her confidence. Like she doesn't speak. And I was always quite an anxious and shy child, definitely. And looking back, like I can really see that now, whereas it just felt normal to me. So I'm really grateful that they did push me to do that, because it's interesting that my love of like theater and acting and singing and dancing, like I still love doing all of those things, but it's helped me have the confidence to like do what I do today. And ironically, like I sucked at English, like grammar, literacy. Oh my God, I sucked. And grammar and punctuation and like I always thought like, am I a bit dyslexic? But I never had it like tested or anything, because I didn't really think that I related to the symptoms of it. But I always thought like writing just came so hard to me, and no matter how much I tried in school, no matter how much I put effort in. And it's really interesting because you hear those stories of like kids who put no effort in and got like A stars, and I was like
Oh,
the
I
kid.
hate them. I hated
I
them as a kid.
know.
Like 11 A stars and one aim. Like, okay, good for you.
Yeah, and they literally did like no revision. They were like the bad kids at school. But yeah, and then there's like kids like me who were like genuinely trying their hardest. And like, I walked out with like C's, D's, E's, like, it was a blooming miracle I even got into sixth form and A levels. And still to this day, I don't have a maths GCSE. And I've worked at one of the biggest banks in the UK as a banking manager. I've been coupon queen helping people save money. So I always kind of look at that and say, like we do create our realities, we do create our destiny. And absolutely, there's jobs out there that require, obviously to work hard in school, go to university, etc. Of course. But I really just feel like for me in my journey, like I was always going to be okay. And I just had this knowing. It was just so weird of like this knowing of like you're going to be fine, you're going to be fine. And like you say, when you look back you think, gosh, like exactly, like I was so terrible at writing and probably still am, to be honest. If you read the first drafts of my books you're probably horrified, but thank God for editors at this stage. But I have improved over the years, and I find it funny now that I am an author, because writing was always like the hardest thing for me.
Yeah, it's similar for me actually. I got like I remember because I wanted to go to university to do law, and we had to do really well in English literature, especially. And I got D, and then I got D again, and it just got to a point where I was really frustrated, and so studied hours and hours and hours, and I finally managed to get an A, and it was like I think 5% away from like top marks or whatever, and they called the paper back as an example for the next year. But that was an anomaly because I'm not a straight A student. I'm like you, C's and D's and C's are kind of stuck in that space. But what that showed me was if you're aligned to the decisions that you make, it may not be easy, but it's the right decision. So eventually it like you'll figure it out and it will work in your favor because you want to give your energy to that thing because there's some kind of excitement or alignment that's kind of guiding that, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't a chore. Like as much as revision sounds like a chore now, back then for that particular subject, it was like I don't mind doing English literature, even though I'm not the best at it. I don't actually mind putting effort into this thing. And I wrote a post recently about how you're doing your soul's work when it doesn't really matter what day of the week it is, and you still want to do it because it's not you don't treat it as a chore. It's not a to-do list. It's who I am. It's a natural expression of who I am. And when you find that alignment, things seem to just flow. And like you said, you kind of have the knowing that you're going to be all right. And you just kind of follow that feeling wherever it takes you.
Yeah, definitely. And like I always used to say, like I'm terrible at tests, I'm terrible at exams, but like coursework and like, because obviously when I did like performing arts, a lot of it was coursework. Like I would do fine in that, but put me in an exam room, put me at a table and forget everything. I just never thrived in those situations. But I put off learning how to drive for so long. And this year I was like, right, 29 nearly, come on, Emma, like get it done. Like this is your 30 before 30 goal. And it's so weird because I took the theory test a couple years back again when I was like, come on, do it. Like you've put it off for long enough. And I just kept failing it by 1 mark. And this is exactly what happened with my maths GCSE. I kept failing it by 1 mark. And I was like, universe, come on. So I took that as my sign of like, it's just not time. It's just not time to drive yet. Like, trust that. And I had so much going on in my life at that time that I couldn't give it my all. I was kind of just hoping and revising and hoping for the best. Whereas when I did it this year, like, I showed up with that alignment. I created the space for it. I gave it my energy, and like it was so much fun learning all about the highway code and all of these things. And I walked into that exam. Obviously, it was the third time I'd taken it, but like the first time this time round. And I got 49 out of 50, and they were like, that is unheard of. And I was like,
Amazing.
this is
Congrats.
fluke. I thought I
Yeah.
failed. Like I was there like, oh my God, like what's the speed limit on this? I honestly thought I'd failed it. But I was so shocked, but so proud of myself, because I was like, this is what happens, Emma, when something's in alignment and you show up with that space and you don't have those other things in your world that are impacting and distracting. And I think that's partially probably what happened at school as well. Like when I just wasn't enthusiastic, I just wasn't fully there. And I think that's why, I felt like I worked hard, and I did work hard. But ultimately, the universe knew better.
Yeah, it has its own wisdom if we allow it to guide us and to trust it fully, right? It's an extension of who we are. So, but when we're in school, it's like it's crazy to think because you're talking about drama and RE and business studies, but it's crazy to think as you get to 17, 18, you're kind of forced to decide to pigeonhole where your life's going to go, right? It's like you need to decide what do you want to be. Like it's now or never kind of feeling that you get when that's not the case. And it's crazy to think when you look back, 17, how the fuck am I supposed to know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? That's mad. And I think it changes as you evolve. But back then, we're kind of forced into feeling like it's either now or you're going to be a failure the rest of your life. And like you said, doing tests, same as me, like I didn't enjoy that way of being tested versus maybe being on stage or speaking to people, etc. But it reminds me of the quote, I can't remember word for word what it is, but like Albert Einstein talks about how like if you measure a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to be a fail. It's going to keep thinking it's a failure. And that's the same with us as humans, right? There's so many different things. A friend once said to me, who he was on the podcast a few years back, and he said to me, everything works, but not everything is for everyone. Like there's so many avenues, for example, in business that you could take. There's like that I've done personally as well. So talking from experience, as I'm sure you have, it's like doing an Amazon FBA thing, doing an eBay store, doing an iPhone application, setting up a like buying and selling physical products, digital products, a blog, a podcast. Like there's so many things that people are making money off of and are successful, but is that the right thing that's for you? Is it in alignment with your soul's work? Because if it's not going to work for you. So I think that's an ongoing journey though, isn't it? Just discovering what's in alignment for you and what isn't.
Absolutely. And like at that age, I didn't have this vocabulary or awareness or understanding. And like you say, it can feel like you're just pigeonholed and then you're like, I need to have it all figured out, but I'm like 17. I don't have it all figured out. I'm just like worried about boys and school and my friends. And, like it's so much pressure. And I think that's why I never wanted to learn how to drive because I just had so much else going on that I was like, oh, no, not another thing. And I just, I was saying actually to my driving instructor, I said, now here at 29, when I'm preparing to take my practical test, like, I'm totally different. I said, I couldn't care whether I pass that test or not. Obviously, it'll cost me more money to book it in again. But ultimately, it's not the be all and end all. If I pass, great. If I don't, I can retake it. And he was like, you'll be surprised like how many 17-year-olds like feel so much pressure from their parents, that feel so much pressure from everyone around them, pressure from school, like pressure to like pass. And he said, like, I see the most confident drivers turn to absolute mush in their tests and they come out shaking and they're like, I don't know what happened. And it's so true. Like we're put under so much pressure at that such young age. And I remember they were trying to make me apply for university and I was like, I just don't want to. I said, I don't know what course I want to do. I'm not sure that's really what I want to do. I want to go and work. And I was literally put in the room with 3 other people out of our whole school year. So everybody else was applying for university. 3 people, me and 2 other people. And we were told like, yeah, you need to go apply for a job, but you're probably not going to get one. You're probably not going to
You're
amount to anything.
basically written off, kind of feeling like you're being written off, right?
And I was just I remember it. I remember it. So it was like this dark, cold room of like, we've just been shunned from society of like, these are the rejects. These are like the people who are never going to do anything, like, bye-bye sort of thing. And it was awful. My mum said like, I wish you blooming told me this happened, but I didn't know any different. I just thought that that's what happened. So of course I didn't bring it up to them at the time. But eventually I did go into employment. I did get a really great job. I worked at Starbucks as my first job and I really, really loved it. And, I just, even with all these voices, even with all these things from school, like, I just didn't listen. I was like, no, I know what I'm doing. And maybe that's the stubborn Virgo in me, of course. But I just had this knowing of like, I'm going to get that job. I'm going to do this. Like, I'm not going to let other people tell me like I can't do something.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because so the difference is with me and my middle brother, I went to university and he didn't, and he decided like you, it wasn't the right thing for him. It just wasn't. He didn't even attempt to apply, and because his path was very different, and in hindsight, it was the right decision for him. But it's crazy how if you're the minority and you're making a decision that's kind of the opposite to everyone else, you're automatically seen as not just a rebel, but like rejected and, like you said,
Mm.
shunned and a failure. But how did that conversation with your parents go down then? Did they kind of have that expectation of you doing higher education? And do you have any siblings as well? I don't know if you're the oldest or the only child or the youngest.
So I'm actually an only child.
Okay.
I never seem to mention that because it's just so normal to me. I'm like, yeah, I'm an only child, like people assume, but no, I definitely am an only child. But my parents are always really supportive. So my dad run his own businesses for as long as I could remember. So I always saw that entrepreneurial spirit within my dad anyway, and like at home. And my mum was a nurse, so obviously she was like 9 to 5, and she went back to work when I was a little bit older. So they were always very supportive, and I just the way I look at it is a bit like lazy parenting, although I'm sure it wasn't. This is just my perspective of like, to me, I wanted them to care, but then to them, they were like, we were just letting you find your feet, like we were letting you decide what you wanted. Whereas I almost kind of wanted them to kind of put the pressure on me, I think. So they were really, really good. Like they were like, you do what's best for you, like, do what you want sort of thing. And they really supported me going into employment. And obviously, like I lived at home until I moved out with my first boyfriend. So they were really, really supportive, of course. And I think that dynamic changed as I went into my first business. And I think there's been a lot of healing over the years with my parents, which they are kind of learning about now through my books, through reading them. And I'm like, oh my God, they're reading them now.
Yeah, that's interesting when your parents kind of get into a space where they're like they kind of see you as separate from them. Like there is something distinct that happens eventually as you progress in your journey and you start creating your own reality essentially, and it's a reality that they don't recognize, and that's when they begin to realize this is a different person now. Like they're not. She's not listening to me. He's not listening to me. He's not here for me. She's not here for me. They're stepping into the world and doing their own thing, and that can be quite scary as parents as well, because you're kind of having to let go of this creature that you've kind of nurtured up to a point, and now you don't quite understand what world they're going into.
Yeah, and it's a lot for us as the kids to go through as well. Like I they always say like, oh, the school years were the best years, but I personally I don't agree with that.
I
Like
don't agree with that. No, I don't either.
it was so stressful, like, and
Yeah,
obviously, like, pressures and bullying, like, I was never heavily bullied, but just all the different things that happened during school and, like, tests all the time, learning, like, and it's funny because I hated learning so much, but then now I'm like, "Right, what course can I do? What else can I
yeah.
learn?" And I'm like writing spiritual essays all the time. And I'm like, who am I? So it's really interesting how I actually really enjoy learning, but it's because I'm really passionate about what I'm learning about. So it doesn't feel stressful. It doesn't feel like work. But yeah, it's interesting as we transition into that stage of our life and go into the big wide world, because we're not taught how to navigate relationships. We're not taught how to really look after our finances, or like human stuff of like, right, here's how you pay your council tax bill, or here's how you navigate meeting people. I know we learn social skills throughout school, but like there's so many different things we're just sort of thrust into, and you kind of just have to like hit the ground running with it. And I know that everything, we need to learn, we need to find those feats for ourselves as such. um but even I always say, like, if I'd have learned meditation or mindfulness in school, I would have been a total different person. And I know they do it now. My little goddaughter, who's 6, does yoga at school. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so cool. I want to come. So yeah, I know they are doing more of it nowadays. But when we were at school, like, you just didn't talk about mental health. You just didn't talk about any of this stuff. And I think that's what was the hardest part for me, was learning mental health from the negative side of things with depression, anxiety. And I had no idea why I had it at that point.
Do you think you would have been ready for it though, if they had introduced meditation, yoga, all that kind of stuff at an earlier age? And the reason I ask that is because I have a distinct memory of someone that I met who was a mentor for a very, very, very short time within the Hindu space. And he was 10 years older than me. No, about eight years older than me at the time. And I was eating meat then. I grew up in a vegetarian household, but I decided at university I want to try meat, and my parents were like, "Well, do whatever you want." And but I was really bought into this idea of, oh, you need protein to be healthy. You need, like, you can't get the nutrients that's in like chicken and turkey and beef, etc. You can't find in a vegetarian diet. So I was like, okay, this is what all the magazines and the YouTube videos are saying, what my friends are saying, so let me do it. So I did it, and I was very stubborn about it, and I had no other awareness outside of that. Like, I hadn't had an awakening of any sorts or anything. It was just me going along with what I thought was right. And here's someone who's 8 years ahead in the journey or further down, and he was like, it causes bad vibration, and the negative emotion that the animal carries, you're basically consuming, and it's becoming a part of your energy and your vibration, and then you're putting that out into the work that you do, and into your day-to-day life. And I was like, that's bullshit. What are you talking about? Like, energy, we like, that doesn't even make sense. And then I just kind of ignored that. And so the reason I bring that in is because I physically and mentally wasn't ready to hear that message until years later, when I was so tapped in. I realized, actually, it doesn't do me any good. That doesn't mean meat doesn't work for someone else. There's plenty of people that are healthy and thriving, but for my body, energetically, it doesn't feel right. I can't digest it. It doesn't feel healthy for me. But that's a message I could only learn later on. And so I'm curious, could you have digested that information earlier on?
I mean, if the person had come in talking about like spirit guides, energy, law of attraction, manifestation, I would have been like, okay. But I feel like if it was yoga, I feel like at that young age, maybe high school, it would have been different, but like primary school and first school, I feel like I would have been like, oh, this is fun. Yeah, let's try it. Or meditation, I might have thought, oh, that's a bit boring. Oh, just sat here looking at nothing sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I think I would have been open to trying them. But I think, yeah, if someone had come in and spoken about energy or anything more advanced like that, I would have been like, what?
What are you talking about? Yeah.
I was always open-minded. I've definitely always been open-minded. I've explored various different cultures and religions over the years. Like I said, my auntie's Buddhist, so I definitely have explored a lot of Buddhism and felt very drawn to that, especially when I was 16 onwards. I got really into Buddhism and really loved meditation. So that's kind of how it started to flow into my life. So I've definitely always been open-minded. My like nan always used to love fairies and pixies and stuff. So it's been there, but I think I always just saw it as normal because it was in my family, but not sort of like pushed on me or that heavy.
Yeah. 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 When did you, so then you didn't go to university, and then kind of what happened after that? Like, when did you start gravitating more towards the work that you're currently doing, more in the spiritual space?
Yeah, so I went and worked from 18 onwards. So I worked in various different retail roles, and then I worked in sales, and I just sort of fell into these roles. Like, it was always the joke that my future boss would come in and buy something from me and then offer me the job. So when I worked at EE, then my banking manager came in. Oh no, sorry. When I worked at Starbucks, my manager at EE would come in and buy his coffee every day, and then he offered me a job. And then when I worked in E, my banking manager came in and got a phone contract from me, and obviously then offered me a job at the bank. So it was always like these roles, these careers as such would just fall into my lap. And again, I think I was just, that's what you did. Oh, it pays well. Oh, it's a good opportunity. Take it, Emma. It was never like, oh, I really want to work in a phone shop. My dad's old business was phones, so I did actually know quite a bit. So that felt more relevant. Whereas banking was, yeah, like, I mean, I didn't even have a maths GCSE. How I got that job, I honestly can't tell you. But like, it just didn't light me up. I mean, money's great, but it just didn't light me up. And obviously, the position I was in was putting people in debt every single day. It was targets of putting people in debt, which is so soul destroying. I cannot tell you. And it's different when you're a cashier, and maybe I would have enjoyed the cashier role more, but obviously I went in at the sales level. So it
Do
was
you do
very,
you, do
very
you, do
different.
you think though, sorry to cut you off there, but do you think though in hindsight, looking back at those three jobs, because it seems like you got them so effortlessly, do you feel like you picked up any key skills during that time that you couldn't have got anywhere else at that time? Well,
Yeah.
actually, maybe you could have got them somewhere else, but I mean, like from those specific opportunities that you got.
Yeah, I feel like they taught me that I didn't want to work 9 to 5. I feel like they
Okay.
taught me that I again, this isn't from like an arrogant perspective, but I think I knew how to do things better with like with not saying like I knew how to do things better, but like I could see how things could be improved and how like I wanted to show up and like serve customers, and like I wasn't allowed to do that. It was very much like, no, Emma, you can't have personal rapport with the customers. Like you need to just sell. And I was like, but rapport is what's going to allow me to gain that trust with the customer. And again, like I would have reviews in my banking role, and I would have like a little 80-year-old dear come in, make her a cup of tea, we sit down, have a chat, and my manager afterwards like, what the hell was that? Like, you've made her a cup of tea, you've sat down and chatted to her about her cats, because I knew the woman well by this point, and you've not sold her anything. And I'm like, but she's an 80-year-old woman, I can't lend her anything anyway, she doesn't need a loan, she has plenty in savings. So I feel like in all of these roles, especially that banking role, I really sort of thought, why? Like, I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing what feels in alignment, but I'm being penalized for that. And that doesn't feel right to me. So it felt like in all these roles that I think my managers hate me a little bit because I just didn't do what they wanted me to. I did what felt right, and I hit my goals every single month. I then got other people's goals put onto my goals, and then I would get told off when I didn't reach that higher goal because no one else is picking up the slack. So it was very much like I learned what toxic masculinity was in those roles.
Mm.
I learned what the toxic workplace was. And yeah, like I enjoyed those roles, definitely not the banking, but I enjoyed the other roles, at periods. But I feel like it helps me to really learn how to connect to people and how to sell, but actually from an aligned space, not from a cold space, which I think so many people would have wanted me to.
Yeah, that is important, and I think looking back at my own experience as well in a kind of selling capacity, you really have to you learn to listen and to serve instead of pushing an agenda and meeting targets, and that's where I kind of fell out of love with that whole world of selling that I was in. I think selling we all do anyway. Day to day, you're trying to influence and embrace, what you feel and what you think and what you kind of want to create and get other people to buy into that collaboration to help make that happen. But there's a way to do it, in a very in like kind of in a way that's filled with integrity and authenticity and yeah, a sense of collaboration instead of me trying to undercut you or to try and um influence you in a way that's kind of subconscious or whatever, and use all of these tricks, but ultimately it's not really going to serve them. And so what impact are you really making? You're not long term. But when did you step into writing your first book? How did that come about?
Okay, well, we've got a little bit before that. So
Okay.
once I left the banking role, so I developed depression very, very quickly from that role because at the time I was in my first sort of serious adult relationship. We moved in together and he had this debt come up. And we had bailiffs at the door, and it was horrible because I was like, what? Like, why is this happening? So he said that he had debt from his ex, which wasn't true when I found out eventually. So I said, right, I work at the bank, I get preferential rates. I'll take out a loan to clear that debt and we can just pay it, like you can pay it off every single month without the debt collectors pressuring you or interest added and stuff. So that's what I did. So obviously it was then my legal responsibility. And within a month, the relationship broke down. He still to this day has never paid a penny of that 7 grand loan. And I was then spiraling into this place of that relationship broke down. I had to move back into my parents. I had 7 grand's debt at the age of 20 that wasn't even actually mine. And I felt so confused and so lost. And I had this depression and anxiety as well built from going into work and every day, being surrounded by debt, putting people in debt, all this negativity. And like, you know, I would have people come in who would beg me to give them money because they couldn't feed their kids. They were like, you must be able to give me a credit card. You must be able to give me a loan. And to say no to someone was the most soul crushing thing ever. And that's when I knew this is not what I am here to do. Like, I cannot continue this role. So I had to quit because of my mental health. I couldn't even go into work. So I went into a part-time retail job after that, just to obviously have money coming in to clear the debt, but also to just help myself and take that pressure off my mental health as well. So I enjoyed that. I worked at Next, so it was like a clothing role, a retail role, and I actually enjoyed that much better, even though the pay was rubbish. And then from that is when I found extreme couponing, because obviously I had to clear the 7 grand debt. And yes, I was living back at home with my parents, but on a part-time wage, it still wasn't going to create massive income to pay that debt off each month. So I came across extreme couponing and I thought, this is wild. Like, all these people are saving so much money and like they're getting thousands of pounds worth of like products and groceries, makeup for nothing. Like, sure, like if I could do this, I could save so much money and pay off that debt easier. So I really got into it. And at the time, couponing was not a thing here in the UK. Like, there were a few people were speaking about it. Martin Lewis was speaking about it, but nothing on the scale that it is today. And I took it upon myself to learn and to find these coupons and get creative. And I was able to clear my debt really, really quickly because of that. And within a few months, I had this whole like massive stockpile in my room. And my parents killed me for having taken up so much of the house with this stockpile. But equally, they did benefit from it as well. And it really gave me an escapism. My anxiety was I couldn't leave the house a lot of the time. So to be able to go to the shop with a coupon got me out the house. So it was really good for my mental health and it got me out of debt. So it was really like an escapism therapy for me, couponing. And 6 months in, my friends were like, Emma, you need to share this on Facebook. Like, people would love, like, come on, you're epic at this. People would love to know about it. So it took a lot of persuasion, but I definitely, in the end, set up a Facebook page called Extreme Couponing and Deals UK. And 6 months into that, it just went wild. Like, I just set that up just to post tips, coupons, like direct people to where I was saving money. And then it just grew into this massive thing. And like the press would get involved. I was presenting on This Morning, giving money saving tips and coupon advice. It went wild very quickly. And I was nicknamed Coupon Queen. All while I had the depression and anxiety still there, still lingering. And I was going to therapy, I was trying things, but nothing was really working and nothing was really getting to the bottom of it. It was just kind of coping. So I turned it into a business eventually. I didn't know I could, but a lovely gentleman helped me one day and said, look, you can be earning money from this. So I turned it into a business and I ran that business for 6 years. And then in 2016, at the end of my second not very great relationship, is when I had my spiritual awakening. And this is when I was at rock bottom. Like, I wanted to end it all. I had suicidal thoughts. It was the worst place I've been in mental health wise, because I was in a really emotionally abusive relationship and physical. And it was just awful because it was just so toxic. And I was toxic as well. Like, I was adding to all of that with my mental health and with my depression and stuff. So I was just in a really awful place where I had this incredibly successful business and I was presenting on TV and doing all these amazing things. So on the outside, people would be like, Emma, like, you've got it all. What are you on about? Whereas on the
Yeah.
inside, I
Yeah, I
hate.
was gonna say, what what your like visceral reaction is to people that are like, oh yeah, money will make me happy, or when I make this amount of money, I'll be happy. Like, what, like from your own experience, of course, that's not the case, right?
No, and it's not been the case twice in my life, even when I had this spiritual business. And I think, and that's why I wrote Positively Wealthy, my second book, because it was all about redefining the journey for me a couple of years ago was redefining my version of wealth and realizing that career, money, success was what I was good at, but it actually wasn't my version of wealth. And that I was chasing all these manifestations and goals, but actually it wasn't actually what I really wanted. And the things that I really wanted weren't manifesting because I wasn't doing that inner work as such. So I had my spiritual awakening and I came across the law of attraction after the breakdown of that relationship. And again, just like couponing, I just fell in love with it. It was like a remembering, it just felt like an escapism from everything. And I was really lucky because my depression was circumstantial depression. It wasn't a chemical imbalance. So I was able, and I tried medication, I tried everything, and nothing was working. It was only making it worse, if anything. So I came off it all, and I thought, right, I'm going to learn how to love myself. The law of attraction, all these books. I'm going to learn how to love myself. And within 4 weeks, I woke up one day with zero anxiety, felt a million times better. And still to this day, I've not had a depressive episode since. I've had moments, and especially with COVID, which does cause the chemical imbalance. I have had moments like that, but nothing circumstantial wise since that point, luckily. So for me, like the law of attraction changed my life hugely. And then I started to talk about this in my work, obviously in my money saving. So I thought people would think I was mad for talking about money saving and then manifestation. But luckily, so many people were really open to it and knew about it. And again, it just felt so divinely guided that that's, what I would talk about on my personal channels. So eventually it got to a place where the couponing business outgrew me, and I outgrew it as well. Not because, I'm always going to use coupons. I'm always going to love money saving, not because of that, but simply because it needed a team of people. And I wanted to focus on the spiritual side of stuff as well now. So I sold that business in 2018 and then went full time like 2017, 2018 with this business. So my first book, Spiritual Queen, I wrote in 2018. And again, I was in a total different place of my life. I was feeling like I was living my best life, but I was definitely in the trenches of inner work, trauma healing. And I always think like the law of attraction like sucks people in and being like, right, manifest your dream life, manifest all this stuff. And the universe is like, haha, now let's do the inner work. Here's your trauma. Here's your limiting beliefs. Like, actually, it's way more than the law of attraction. So I feel like that's what came up, yeah, at that point in the journey.
Yeah, I was gonna say yeah, there's a lot in that what you've just covered, and I'm conscious not to just glaze over it, but like so just to go into before we move further into the conversation with law of attraction and kind of what you were writing, like when you were going through, it'd be good if you could share a little bit around what the symptoms were that gave you an indication that you were going through depression and kind of how you navigated those suicidal thoughts and kind of what was the bridge between um eventually seeing some kind of light.
Mm. And I felt different things at different points. So when after the first relationship, when I was in the banking job, I would have panic attacks and I would feel like I was dying. And I remember it was always when I was on the bus to work. It was always when I was traveling to work. I would have this heart palpitation. I'd feel like I was going to throw up. My whole body would heat up. And honestly, like I honestly thought I'm dying. Like I'm literally dying and I'm going to die on this bus and nobody's like, I can't even scream out for help sort of thing. So it was awful to experience those panic attacks, especially in the early days, because they just kept happening every single time I was off to work, every single time. And then it got to a point where I couldn't even leave the house. Like I was so anxious all of the time and just felt so wired and my adrenals were stressed and like I just felt miserable. And I lost the joy for life. I wouldn't say I ever loved myself at that point anyways, but I definitely didn't feel that love for myself at that point. And then fast forward to when I felt it in 2016 on my spiritual awakening. So after that, I'd had CBT therapy, I'd had counseling, I'd tried antidepressants, and nothing was giving me shifts, nothing was really helping. It would give me short-term relief, but nothing was really giving me long-term relief or actually feeling like, wow, I'm actually getting to a good place with it. So I did things on and off throughout those years. And then in 2016, it was really difficult because I just didn't feel like I didn't have the support there. The boyfriend I was with didn't understand it. They thought I was just mad. And I was acting out and doing things that absolutely, like, a lot of mental health people struggle with, and it just wasn't nurtured or supported. So I think I had to support myself hugely through that, which is the worst when you're in that place, because you want to be supported, you want to be held, and you want to feel like, okay, I can do this. So that's that determination again, where I was the only one giving myself that. And my parents at the time, like, well, they're still my parents now, but my parents at that point, they weren't the most supportive with it. I think they didn't understand it. They just thought that, oh, it's fine. Like, what's Emma got to be depressed about? And I think that's the biggest misconception with depression and mental health is they saw the successful business. They saw me twice a week and they saw the good bits. They didn't want to hear the reality of it, or it was just easy to blame the boyfriend. It was just easy to ignore it. And I think that's so common with our parents and grandparents' generation, to just, we don't talk about emotions, we don't talk about that, you just get on and deal with it, Emma. And I really felt a sense of bypassing, just to be honest, with it from all my family. And I think that was the hardest part, because I felt truly alone with it. And my friends, they were really supportive. My best friend at the time had depression as well, so like, she more than anybody understood it. So I definitely had her around me and other friends who tried to understand and tried to help, definitely. But I think the one problem with depression and mental health is like, you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to sit there and say to your friends, I think I might want to end my life, or I don't want to be here anymore, or I feel miserable every day, because that's not what people want to hear. And these were the times before the Instagram highlights reel. This was the time before, is it Instagrammable? Let's share the good bits on Instagram. So it was hard. It was really hard. But again, I knew that I couldn't take my life. I knew that I didn't want to take my life. And I knew that there had to be more. And that determination and that seed just kept growing. And then when I found the law of attraction, I wasn't in therapy, I wasn't in sort of anything like that at that point. That felt like a therapy to me, because I was finally learning to love myself, finally learning to get out of these toxic situations, finally learning to be positive and what being positive meant. So I feel like that was my therapy as such. But then also years later, that real inner work and the real harder inner work came up with the trauma, with healing the past, and obviously uncovering the childhood as well.
It's it's interesting because it, like you said earlier, the initial attraction to kind of learning about the law of attraction or spirituality and the way that it's presented on YouTube highlights or Instagram highlights, whatever, is there is this need to want to be successful, and that this will be the antidote for it. This will be the thing that gets you there. And so you create vision boards and goals and all that kind of stuff, and you can get quite quickly sucked into it. And it's fun dreaming about what your life could be like. But what you just touched on is important, which is doing the inner work, and that sounds like a term that's like kind of cliche to even say, or like kind of cringy because it's used so much now, but it just understanding who you are, basically. And I talked about this on the podcast yesterday because the guy I was talking to, like, it was a big part of his journey, and it basically comes down to the question of, who am I? Like, what is my story? Why am I feeling the way I am? What does that mean about what's happening in my life? And do I want to continue to be defined by this? And I don't think we spend enough time in the trenches to kind of reconnect to our story, our emotions, feel into that, understand what that means for us, and then decide, okay, who do I want to be? And then kind of create from that free space, because you can still use law of attraction, in my experience, but then you're creating a reality that's kind of masked by a person that's not you. Like, you're not your authentic self, so you're not going to really create a reality or a life or attain goals that feel fulfilling, because the person that set them is very different to the person that you thought would enjoy them, if you know what I mean, right? Like, it's about who you are. It comes back to understanding who you are at your core.
100%, like, hell yes, with all my soul to that. Because when I first was manifesting, I was manifesting from a traumatized space. I'd gone through two really crap relationships, and I'd obviously had depression for many years. So I was manifesting from that space. And whilst what I was manifesting was great and epic, and I felt like that was everything's going to change now. Everything's different. Like, now you know the law of attraction. Now you're setting these intentions. Now you're positive. Now you're doing good. Now you're feeling good. Like, it's all going to be different. And yes, to some degree, it does shift. And yes, to some degree, that is true. But and this is why I wrote Positively Wealthy, because I manifested everything on my vision board and felt so freaking miserable inside. And the relationship I manifested was, again, another karmic lesson. He was my twin flame, and that was a whole freaking journey in itself, and a real deep journey of bringing everything up to the surface. So I was pissed when that didn't work, because I was like, I've manifested all of this, universe. Like, what the heck? Like, this doesn't feel like love. This doesn't feel like how it was meant to be. And obviously, as I've gone along my spiritual journey, I've learned more things about divine assignments, about obviously the divine plan for ourselves, and obviously how it's more than just the law of attraction. Because I think so many people are like, well, law of attraction's be all and end all. That's the only thing, that's the only law that exists. That's the only thing that exists. So if I want something, I'm going to get it. And I'm like, yes, in part, but also no, because if it's not for your highest good, you're not going to manifest that. And there are so many instances throughout my life where I would have like held myself and been like, I know this is meant for me. I know this is the best thing ever for me. And now I'm like, yeah, for your traumatized self, Emma, for your traumatized
Exactly. Yeah,
self.
exactly. Yeah. It's a different version of you that was asking for that. Because I was a time in my life when I was like, um, the Lamborghini and the apartment in the city and all of these other things, working, being a partner at a law firm, all of those things were good, but they were ambitions for a different version of me. And so eventually they kind of fell away. As I evolved and changed, I had to reevaluate and kind of take stock of, what are my beliefs right now? What do I feel about them? And do I want to reinvent them based on who I'm becoming? Because you kind of get this sense along the way that your view of the world and your view of yourself is beginning to shift. And so what you once believed may not always be kind of carried through with you. And so you've got to take time to slow down and reflect. And that's, again, I talked about this with a few people recently, about creating space to really sit with who you're becoming, because we're always becoming something. We're always on that journey of evolution. But if you carry old beliefs and old stories with that new self, you're going to quickly find yourself in a place of misalignment again, because there's so many opportunities that we have along the way where our identity kind of sheds, and then it's time to kind of reinvent yourself almost, or to at least take stock of where you are, so you can decide if that's who you want to continue to be. Did you find at a certain point that so after, because you went through those 3 jobs, a couple of relationships at this point, did you go through a point where, at the time of this spiritual awakening, you kind of felt like it was time to shed your identity, or like an old self was beginning to fall away. And what did that look and feel like? Because I think a lot of people talk about a spiritual awakening, but it can look very different for everyone.
Yeah, 100%. And just to add to what you were saying, like what you resist persists. And so many people are like, I moved on from the past, like it's all good, I'm over that. And we carry these stories, we carry these beliefs into from childhood into here and now. So it really is always impacting us. And when I had my spiritual awakening, like obviously when you're in a depressive spiritual awakening, it's like a dark night of the soul. It is a freaking initiation in itself. Like I, on my podcast, my first question to everyone is like, when did you spiritually awaken? What's your story? And I've heard hundreds of stories over the years now from all sorts of people. And you really have like two extremes. You have the people who are like, yeah, my mum was spiritual. I had like a spiritual experience of like an angel or a fairy, and I woke up and yeah, it was great. And then you got the people who, like myself, are like depression in the trenches, like dark night of the soul, like rock bottom, like it's a freaking huge shedding, like, and obviously I'm sure there's in between stories as well that people have, but from interviewing over like 150 people, I think it is now, like everybody has like really gentle, nice awakening and hardcore awakening. And I think I definitely fell into the hardcore awakening category. And
And also, just to say, it isn't just one awakening either,
no,
because there might be one extreme one that stands out, but there's always these other little ones that happen along the way, and you're called to kind of shed another version of yourself, and another version of yourself, and another version of yourself, and that can all kind of manifest in different ways.
absolutely. And I feel like now I need to change my question to how many times have you spiritually awakened? What's your story? But yeah, so like I've had numerous awakenings over the years. Some have felt more gentle, some have felt equally as dark night of the soul, and like really, like you say, that purging energy. And even last year I got diagnosed with PTSD, and I was in a really great space in my life and still am. And like, I was the happiest I'd ever been. And I was like, how on earth can I get diagnosed with PTSD? How on earth am I having flashbacks? How on earth am I in therapy again? And, you know, my therapist was like, but Emma, like, it's only when your nervous system regulates, it's only when you feel safe enough can your body bring this up to be released. So I had to learn that actually this awakening was different, that I wasn't and am in a really great space, but also that's when the things feel safe enough to come up. So I think it's interesting because even when we do inner work and feel like we're in that space where things are feeling good, things are great, like you say, there's another layer that comes up. And sometimes that layer has to come up when you are in the good phase. Because like for me, who's suffered with so much over the years, nervous system, adrenals, chronic stress, trauma, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel any of that. So of course, that's when something as huge as PTSD could come up, because I was able to handle it and I was able to give it the space, like you say, by creating that space and being able to look at that and be able to work with it. So I've definitely had dark nights of the soul. I've definitely had periods where I felt like I've awakened. I feel like every single year I'm meeting a new version of myself since that spiritual awakening. And I remember this video I watched years back about this couple, and he said, oh, every year I meet a new version of my wife and I love it. And it feels like that. It feels like we're all shedding those layers and shedding those skins as such. And ironically, this year is 9 years since a lot of this happened. And obviously 9 in numerology is like endings, wrap up, completion. And I literally had a reading with one of my good friends the other day when I had, or a couple months ago now, when we were doing some crystal therapy, and she was like, this is the completion. You are literally shedding that Emma now. Like you are moving into this whole new Emma in your 30s, who doesn't feel trauma anymore, who hasn't experienced. And it's a weird one, because when I uncovered everything that's happened in my life over the last few years writing this new book, it changed everything, because it made sense, and it was a relief, because it almost made everything in my life make sense to me, which I never had before. There was always this confusion and this missing puzzle piece, but almost it was like, wow, for pretty much 90% of your life, you've never known anything but trauma. And that was a real big headfuck of how do I operate now when I've not really ever known how to operate before trauma, because I was so young. So it's been a real learning curve. And I feel like the last year, especially since that PTSD diagnosis, has been one of the biggest initiations for me because, yes, I know the tools now. Yes, I know who to work with. Yes, I know what I'm working with. But it still doesn't make it any easier sometimes when you are discovering these huge things and parts of your history where you're like, wow, that's who I am. Like, this is why I am the person I am. And now I don't have to operate from that identity, from that space, and I can heal this and come from that clean slate, like you say, and evolve.
What a tragedy it would be if you died and never really knew who you really were.
Mhm.
Um, I was journaling like a few weeks back, and those words came up to me, and I was like, wow, okay, this there's something to this, because so many people are afraid to walk this path, and it is the path to courage, the path
Mhm.
of courage, because it's scary to then deconstruct your whole reality now and look back in the past, because you'd like to think that your current reality is fine and it's comfortable and you want to continue in that space, and to go back means you need to almost deconstruct where you are right now and understand where it's come from. Will then potentially throw into question, or guaranteed to throw into question, everything that you've kind of set up for yourself that's so nice, and the way that you kind of live your day-to-day life, and the relationships that you're in, and the way that you're making money, and the way that you're showing up in friendships. Like, those things could all change once you begin to understand who you really are. So it's scary because it's like turning your life upside down. But I think awakening is, I think everyone does have that calling. It's like the hero's journey. You do get that call to step in and to answer. Like on the iPhone, it's the red and green button, right? And it's like it's up to you. Do you want to listen or not? And if you don't have to. That's fine. But then again, what a tragedy it would be. You get to the end of your life and you realize, fuck, everything was fake. Everything was a lie. Like there was this other parallel reality that was waiting for me. I could jump and access it at any time, and I just decided not to, because the distance between this one and this one was courage. That's it. But yeah, I often use death as a perspective to live more fully and to step into those decisions that might be scary, because the fear and the scariness doesn't really dissipate. It doesn't really go away. You just learn to work with it and to step into it and to build a relationship with it.
Absolutely. And it's so uncomfortable, so sometimes, as we've said, and like, it's not for the faint-hearted. And I think that's why, I mean, it's great so many more people now are feeling more courageous and vulnerable and want to. But like, I teach inner child work, for example, and I love inner child work and always have, and like, I love it. That's why I teach it, that's why I trained in it. And the amount of people who resist it is unreal. Like, even the words in a child book seem to just trigger people. And it's so funny from my perspective, because I've got some people, like clients and followers, who are like, yay, love it. Oh my God, this is so much fun. And then you get the other people. And I remember I was at MBS London in April, and my boyfriend was stood at the back and no one knew it was him or who he was. And these two girls were walking out, and then one of them said, oh, what did you think? And she said, oh, that inner child shit, isn't it? Like, that's a load of bollocks. And he was pissing himself because he thought, you do not know who you've just said that in front of. And he said it to me afterwards, and I was like, it triggers people up so much. And obviously, like, not every modality and tools ever going to resonate with everybody, of course. Like, that's why there's so many out there that we can try. But it just made me laugh, because I think, oh, there's that inner child who doesn't want to look at their inner child. And it's funny, because when we feel that resistance and we feel that, like, oh, it is that inner child throwing that little strop and being like, no, we're not going into our past. No, we're not looking at this, because we can't possibly, because then this could come up and this could happen. So our ego, our inner critic, who I believe is the inner child, constantly wants to keep us safe, but we are the ones who need to keep our inner child safe. We are the ones who need to love them back into the light, love them back into that healing and completeness, so that we can feel whole within ourselves. And it's interesting because my work always used to focus on inner child work, like limiting beliefs, fears, and obviously a lot of that is in the book, but also like the shadow work as well. That's another aspect that is so missed. And what frustrates me the most about law of attraction is how amazing it is and it works, but it doesn't work for so many people because they don't know that the inner work is the secret. And there are so many key steps missed out of the original 3 steps that are in The Secret: ask, believe, receive. Hence why I believe there's 5. And I share these because they take people so much deeper and understand in a really practical way, actually, what is the belief step? What is that actual process to manifestation? So the number one like message I get from people is, Emma, I've like read The Secret, I've done this, I just don't think I can manifest. I just don't think it's for me. And it breaks my heart to read that, because manifestation is for everybody, but so much is missed out of old school teachings, like privilege, for example. Like everybody's starting from a different starting point. So what my results would be different to somebody else's, because we've both got different backstories, we've got different limiting beliefs, we've got different cultures, maybe we've got different things that have happened. So how on earth could we expect 7 billion people's results to be exactly the same when we all have different stories, we all have different paths, we have so many differentiating things that would give us different results? So manifestation is for everybody and you can manifest. But if people knew about the inner work and had these tools and had these resources, like writing Hurt, Healing, Healed was, I always say, it's the deepest book, but the one that's going to get you the best results. Positively Wealthy is great. It's done amazing. I love it. It's my second book, baby. It's one of my favorites. I love it. And it's amazing. But Hurt, Healing, Healed is for those almost like intermediate manifestors of, you're manifesting, you know what it is, maybe you've read Positively Wealthy, maybe you know my 5 steps, but you're like, right, there are blocks here. Why am I not manifesting what I really want? Why am I feeling like this inner critic, my ego, my inner child is constantly chattering and constantly saying stuff and putting me down and niggling at me? So if everybody did the inner work, the world would be a much happier place, I can tell you that.
Oh, wouldn't it? Yeah, I'd love to see that. Heaven on earth, basically, that would be. But yeah, we take it everything that's kind of said on the surface of, like you said, the 3-step process. And there's so many, 3 steps, 7 steps, 10 steps, whatever. And it's sold on the basis that you will get the life that the person has who's selling it, or the perceived life that they are kind of selling it with. But like you said, there's so much like contextual information that you need to understand and kind of take a step back and think about who's the person that's trying to manifest, because that's where the work needs to happen, because who you're being is what's basically creating your reality, right? And I think we are all manifesting to some extent every single day. Like, what the life that you're living, you manifested that. Whether you like it or not is irrelevant, but you created it. It got created by a version of you that once existed, and that is continuing to exist. And so really it's like, until who you're being changes, the results won't change. And we're in a time right now, and someone said to me on a podcast, we're in a time right now where everyone wants quick fixes to stuff. Like you put stuff in a microwave and it's like two minutes and it's cooked, it's done. They don't want to go through the process of buying the ingredients and preparing it and doing a prayer and understanding what seasoning goes with what ingredient, and then waiting for it to boil, and then waiting for it to cook, and then putting it in the oven and this and that, and then serving it. That's the whole journey. But where the disconnect is, and where I've had to kind of slow down and learn, is to enjoy that process. It would be so boring if I thought about a car and I got it tomorrow. Like, the excitement is in, I don't know how it's going to come, but I'm willing to follow the adventure and follow the clues, just like you would as a kid. You want to go on a treasure hunt. Well, if all the eggs were right there, that'd be boring. You want to go and the Easter egg hunt. I did that once when I was younger, and the fun is in figuring out all the clues that are written on the map and then trying to crack the code and follow that. And you're supposed to have fun while it's happening. as difficult as it can be, you could be frustrated if you're going the wrong way or you haven't found it yet, or other people have got more than you, or and you're one of the last ones, whatever. But it's really about kind of coming home to yourself and enjoying that process, right?
1,000,000%. And, I look at all the different journeys and struggles and lessons I've learned along my manifestation journey. And like at the time, I felt so freaking frustrated. I was like, why is it not happening, universe? Like, why? And now I look back and I'm like, God, you learned so much and you needed to learn all of that, Emma, to be the person that you are today. And
Mm,
I recently did a YouTube video and I said, like, play with the notion, what if the journey is the real event? What if the manifestation isn't the be all and end all, and actually the journey is the main event? And it's so important because so many people get numb along the journey. And I know I definitely did at
I
points.
was there a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And you numb out and you're like, and I literally had a client say to me yesterday, oh, but Emma, it's fine that I feel miserable in my work because when my business does take off, it'll be fine. And I said, but we know that's not how manifestation works, right? We both know that's not how it works. You have to feel good now. You have to be present. You have to feel that gratitude and appreciation for all the things you have in your life before the manifestation comes, even if the manifestation doesn't come. And that is what that true step 4 in my process is, of letting go and surrendering, is truly being at peace with it. And it can feel so frustrating when you're in the trenches. And I know definitely with the inner work specifically, not necessarily waiting for manifestation, but actually the inner work trenches, I have felt so frustrated at times. I've wanted to kick and scream. I've wanted to be like, why, universe? Not again. Like, not another thing I have to heal. Like, surely I've healed everything. But we have to learn that we will learn until our last breath here on this earth, and there will be lessons and blessings in each season of our life. And it's about being able to navigate them with acceptance, navigating them with grace, and navigating them from a space of awareness. So having the tools, having the awareness. And now when things come up and like, I look now back over the last few years of my life when I wished and prayed and wanted things so badly, and I have them here now, I'm like, but you're in this stage now, and this stage means something different. And now you're working towards something else. Because that's what we always do. When our manifestation comes, we then work towards something else, another goal in life or another thing. And we never really appreciate that journey. We never really appreciate like you say, that journey of buying the ingredients, making it. And I'm definitely guilty of putting stuff in the microwave sometimes. Definitely. And we do live in a culture of like 7 second.
All of us do. All of us do. We're human beings at the end of the day. We want shortcuts. We want the quickest way to get there. But um, it's just you got to think about whether it serves you or not, and just learning to balance it. Because there, again, I don't want people to feel like there needs to be some level of perfection to this, and like you have to have it all together for things to move. You don't, because I'm certainly not perfect, and I've made decisions that people are like, oh, you're so brave and you're so courageous, and like you've always got so much going on. It's because I've chosen to. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I'm not concurrently working on myself along the way. It doesn't end just because
No.
I've got to a certain point. I'm like, oh, I'm perfect now, I don't need to do any work. Like that doesn't happen. You're just constantly evolving and navigating emotions and old stories and beliefs, and new stories and new beliefs that are coming up, and trying to figure out how that all fits together. You never really have it all together. You're constantly just becoming
We're all
until
winging
you
it.
until you die. Yeah, basically, yeah. And what the biggest thing that we've kind of don't know, well, I certainly wasn't aware of it. When you're a kid, you look up at adults and you think, shit, they have it all together. Your teachers and your parents, and you're like, oh, I better live up to an expectation because they have it all figured out. Like they know the best way. As you get older, you realize the teachers, the parents, the older friends, the older cousins, all the people that you look up to, like no one, like everyone's winging it. Like they
Yeah.
don't know shit. They don't know shit. And I don't think you ever get to a place where you know everything, and neither should you want to, because that just closes you off from new adventures and new learnings and new teachings and new relationships. And um, yeah, it's just about kind of softening the approach. because we can make it so serious. And I was like that for a long time. That's why I got to a place where I was numb, because I was like, hustle, grind, sleep 4 hours a day. You're a pussy if you don't, if you don't work at least 18 hours a day. And I was thinking, I'm so much better than everyone else. Look how much I'm working. I barely sleep, while everyone's kind of being lazy on a Saturday or a Sunday. Here's me drinking coffee and grinding away. And then you get to a point where you burn out and you're like, shit, I'm so angry. Like I don't like myself. I don't like what I've created for myself. I don't know what I want to do next, who I am. And but sometimes you need that because you don't know any better. And then you kind of like, okay, heed the call and listen to how my body's feeling, and just kind of take those nudges and do something with it. Because that's the other thing, right? You've written great books. I haven't had the chance to read them yet, but from what you've told me and from what I've seen, the stuff that you share on Instagram and online on your YouTube videos and stuff, it's amazing. And there's so many other great teachers out there. But the difference is, because even with me, I share my writing and the stuff that comes up for me and stuff like that. But there's so much information you can take in. It's
Mm.
about knowing how to distill that and listen to the right information, but then also to do something with it. Because knowledge alone is not enough. Like, you can know the 3-step process and you can be following all the best accounts and read all the best books. Okay, so what? That's not going to do anything for you. They're all crutches until you actually want to do something about it. And like you said, step into that work, right?
Definitely. And like I said to one of my business clients the other day, actually, because she was getting frustrated that she was like, and she's epic at what she does, but she was getting frustrated that people weren't doing the work. And I said, hun, I was like, if you knew the excuses I get over the years from my clients of why they haven't done their tasks and actions between, I was like, honestly, like I've heard it all. And it's true, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. And I've experienced that in my relationships, I've experienced that in work. And at the end of the day, like any of us who are creating content or inspiring or writing books, whatever, like we're sharing our truth, we're sharing what feels in alignment to us, and we're sharing what we know can help people and can give people results and whatever, but how that's perceived. And I remember Rebecca Campbell always said to me, like, Emma, once your first book comes out, you have to let it go. How it lands with people, how people perceive it, the reviews, whatever, is them. um and the other day, just to make you laugh, I had a review on Positively Wealthy, my first 2-star review, and someone said, this is not a review of the book, it's a great book, but I just couldn't be bothered and life got in the way. And I was like, thank you so much for taking the time to leave that incredibly helpful review
Yeah.
of the book's great, but life got in the way. And I think that's the thing. And I'm sure there's a book, yeah, it's A Course in Miracles, and they say it's the most read book in the world, but the least actioned book. And I think there's so many books out there like that, because people have all this epic information and then they're like, yeah, no.
Then there's people that are stuck in between, right? Like, and this is why for me, integrity has become a word that's hugely important to me personally as my own value system, because there's people that have consumed all this information and think they know better now. And then they start to act that way towards other people, kind of putting themselves on a pedestal, because they're beginning to feel like I'm better than everyone else because I've learned all this stuff and there's so much that you guys don't know, and let me share it. And but you're just stuck there. You're not actually, the person who's reading it is not actually doing anything with it, and so your life doesn't actually shift. You just become this annoying preacher in between stages, and it's just, I feel like there's a dangerous slither of the population, especially in the spiritual community, that are stuck there. Um, yeah, it's a pandemic.
And you got to stay humble. Like the universe knows how to humble
You
you
have to,
massively. And
yeah.
like if I would be lying if I sat here and said like, yes, I know everything about law of attraction and that's it, living my best life, nothing else to do, I'm just going to spend my life teaching everybody. Like, I know the universe is going to come in different seasons of my life and be like, right, now we're learning this, Emma, now you're going to write about this because you're going through this experience. And I think that's the beauty of life, is we never know where we're going to end up. We never know how it can unfold, despite if you go to psychics, despite if you go to whatever. Like, we never truly know how things are going to pan out in life. And I think that's an exciting journey by itself of allow it to unfold, allow your manifestations to manifest in the way that they're meant to. Like you said, and my manifestations have massively evolved over the years as I've stepped into these new versions of myself. And now what I manifest and now what I aspire to is hugely polar opposite to what it would
Yeah,
have
same.
6 years ago. And I think that is the spiritual journey. And I feel like that's what I said at the beginning, like the law of attraction kind of like says, right, come on in, manifest your Lamborghini, manifest this. And then it's like, haha, right, now let's become spiritual. Let's look at your inner work and let's turn you into the best version of yourself. And I think that is the spiritual journey. That is the real essence of what we're doing. And I think when people, like you say, get stuck on like, my way is the only way to do something, everything else is rubbish, only listen to my work and stuff like that, like it just pigeonholes people. And like, I'm under no illusion that my work's not going to resonate with every single human being on the planet. That's why there are so many great law of attraction teachers out there, because different ways that people express things and explain things will resonate with different people, and everybody has a different manifestation superpower. And this is what I talk about of in old school teaching. It's very like, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then people are like, why is my manifestation not here? Yes, because inner work's never spoken about in old school teachings, but secondly, because everybody's different. 7 billion people are not all going to respond to the same tools and techniques as each other. That's ridiculous. Like you and I, we would probably respond different to the same techniques. It's yes about the personal story and the history and the beliefs, yes, the inner work side of things, but it's also like we respond to different things. I hate visualization. I hate it with a passion because I find it boring and I start obsessing about it. And for me, writing, and obviously as an author, that's probably why, but writing and scripting and writing goals lists and, all the practical things of manifestation, I love doing. It brings me joy, and I see the biggest results with because it's bringing me joy and I'm honoring myself and I'm honoring what feels good to me. But a lot of the time, and I don't know where people get this from, maybe they just feel that pressure, but I get so many DMs of, well, I've been told I need to do this and I've been told I need to do that, and I've read that you have to do this. And I'm like, but is that really the essence of law of attraction? You have to do this. And what was if that doesn't resonate with someone? Or what was if that doesn't land with someone? Or what happens if that shoe doesn't fit all, because everybody's different and everybody has a different personal history? So I feel like old school law of attraction is very black and white. It's very this or that. It's very like 2D, whereas real law of attraction and how energy works now, here 20 plus years on from when a lot of these texts were written and began being taught, we're all very different. We're in a different world. Energy works differently now, and I think things need to be adapted and evolved. And also we have to listen to ourselves and what feels right to us. And if writing your desires 77 times feels crap, please listen to that.
Yeah, it again goes back to everything works, but not everything's for you. You have to figure out what speaks to you. There isn't just one way of doing something. There's so many roads that lead to the same thing. So it's just about finding what feels comfortable and aligned to who you are. And that's why it's important to do that inner work, because how do you know who you are? How do you know what feels aligned? Kind of, I know for me, I had to kind of reconnect with a feeling of joy again, because I was numb. I'm like, what? I can't feel anything apart from a little bit of anger. And then that anger kind of revealed so much more anger. And then all the joy was kind of suppressed underneath that, because I hadn't taken the time to really process and acknowledge it. But yeah, it's a journey. It's definitely not an overnight process. It's something that you begin and then you're just on that journey for the rest of your life. There is no like A to B in 1 year or 1 month. It's an ongoing thing. One thing I'm curious about, because I'm looking at the time as well, I'm conscious not to run too late over. Have you got another few minutes?
I have. You're
Okay,
fine.
cool. How did you come up with the name for your newest book, and when is it released? Because I believe it's not out right yet, right?
Yeah, so it's out on October the 11th. So it's up for pre-order everywhere, but it's officially released on October the 11th. So Her Healing Healed was interesting because the last two book names I haven't thought of. They've channeled through my best friends. So Positively Wealthy, I was sat around my best friend Selena's house and I was like, positively this, like there was loads of words. And I was like, right, Selena, like, what do you think? And she was like, positively wealthy. And I was like, yes, oh my God, that's it. So I owe all of that to Selena. And then this time I was speaking to my good friend George, who you know as well. And we were discussing, and I was like, right, it's about like moving through hurt, and then we're moving through the pain. And he was like, hurt, healing, healed. And I was like, yeah. So spirit seems to channel the spiritual queen I came up with myself. I'll take credit for that. But the last two have definitely been channeled through my friends, which is great. So I owe a lot of, well, I owe all of the names to them. But yeah, this book is so different. Yes, it's a book on manifestation. Yes, it's a book on law of attraction because it's me, and obviously that's what I'm really passionate about. But it's a book on releasing limiting beliefs, fears, and blocks to supercharge your manifestation. So this is, like I said, the deepest book with the biggest results. Positively Wealthy is great for those who are just starting out. They want to learn the 5 steps. They want to try and find their manifesting superpower. Try all these different amazing techniques. It's a 33-day guide. So it's like 33-day challenge that you can do, and you get huge results from. You can read all the Amazon reviews and what people have got to say. It's a great fun book to do. Hurt, Healing, Healed is also fun, but it goes deeper. It really, it's for those people who are like, okay, I've tried Positively Wealthy, I've tried manifestation, and I know there's something blocking me. Why are these limiting beliefs and fears there? Maybe I've got some trauma. Maybe I know I want to, as we've been saying, move back to that place of joy and really know who I am. Or maybe you've broken up from someone, or you're going through a difficult phase in your life and you want to move through to that joy again. So the book can land with people at any stage in their life. And it's not a book that you just read once and put down. It's like a book for life. It's a toolkit, and it's a book to guide you from when things come up in life, when things come up in different seasons of your life, when we can feel hurt in so many different ways as well. It could be something huge that feels so massive in your life, a huge change, a huge shift, a loss, whatever. But it can also be like, okay, I've got a niggling little fear of I'm not worthy enough. Okay, I'm going to pick up the book and work through that. So there's obviously, the book can help with so many different things, and it guides you through that hurt stage, that healing phase, and to that healed space of moving past the belief, past the past, essentially, and manifest from that aligned space. So the last section is all designed on manifestation. There's manifestation throughout, but it's the last section is that aligned manifestation. And then, right, where do we manifest from this space? When you know who you are, you're connected back to unconditional love, you're in alignment, and how do we move forward with that and meet that new you?
Are there any topics or conversations that you're anticipating to write in another book that you haven't yet talked about in any of your work?
Yes. I am, yes. So it always happens. Like, I'm like, right, I'm not going to write any other books. I'm just going to, like, well, not never, but like right now, I have a little bit of time off, enjoy. And then the universe is like, let's write a book on this. And I'm like, okay. So I'm giving myself until January. I'm not writing it until next year. And I am working on another project at the moment. So it might even be later than that now. But I'm really excited because I feel like alignment and joy, and now like the Hurt, Healing, Healed journey was not out the way, but do you know what I mean? I've gone through
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and we've talked about it. I feel like really alignment and joy is like the big thing that's screaming through my work, and what I really want to write about as well.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to that. Maybe we'll do another conversation about that as the months go by and as you step into that work. So as we wrap up, what's the best place for people to like connect with you, find out more about you, and just find out more about your work?
Yeah, of course. So you can find me at I am Emma Mumford on all social media. I'm mainly active on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. So come on over and say hi. And obviously, you can get Positively Wealthy and Hurt, Healing, Healed from anywhere that sells books. And my website is emmamumford.co.uk if you want to learn more about everything that I do.
Amazing. Well, this was a great conversation. I appreciate you making the time to share your energy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.